TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations.
Shalom, Erev Tov, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News, broadcast to you from Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asserts that Jerusalem is working quietly to expand Israel's circle of peace with its neighbors. U.S. Envoy to Syria Tom Barrack notes that he expects to have atrocities continue in Syria. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says that security forces of the interim authorities in Damascus are continuing to commit atrocities against minorities in Syria. The people of Israel are no longer a helpless people who can be persecuted, bullied, murdered, or exiled at will. Speaking to the Israeli Parliament's plenum, or Knesset in Hebrew, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that whoever rises up to destroy Israel will face the might of its defense establishment and armed forces.
For 2,000 years, we have suffered from repeated waves of anti-Semitism, from exiles, from pogroms, from acts of mass murder. The difference is that in the past we were helpless and could do nothing, but today we strike at those who rise up against us to destroy us. The systematic cultivation of our strength is the solution to ensuring our existence and our future. In the face of those who criticize us, we do not feel weak in our knees. We do not tremble like a leaf blown by the wind. Maybe that's how you act in the face of international criticism, some of which quotes you. But we don't act that way. We stand firm. Our voice is heard on a high level. We stand firm against those who seek our lives. We strike at those who seek our harm. And we do something else, members of Parliament. As a strong and stable state, we are constantly working quietly to expand the circle of peace with our neighbors. I believe that it will happen, but for that to happen, I won't elaborate on it beyond what I'm doing today.
Prime Minister Netanyahu stopped short from elaborating on prospects for expanding Israel's circle of peace with its neighbors. Nevertheless, the Israeli premier did highlight Jerusalem's deepening of relations with global powers to include Germany.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz came here to deepen security, economic and technological ties with Israel. This past week, we concluded a massive deal with Germany, selling it the Arrow 3 system for the purpose of intercepting ballistic missiles. I hope that we all realize, I hope that you realize, the significance of the historic overhaul that occurred. 80 years ago, we were a stricken and persecuted nation that was forced into the furnaces by the Nazi plagues. And today, a strong Israel that has risen from the ashes sells advanced weapons systems to the army of democratic Germany. Even when we have differences of opinion with Germany, we do not bow our heads. We stand firmly for our vital interests. It is not just with Germany, with everyone without exception.
Amid reports of Syrian attempts to convince Russia to deploy forces along Syria's southern border with Israel, aimed at frustrating Jerusalem's forward defense against Damascus's refusal to forgo a large military presence along Syria's front with the Jewish state, Netanyahu also seized the opportunity to highlight his relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin and pointed to conversations that aim to ensure Israel's national security interests are kept.
We have ongoing contacts with another world power, Russia. I speak with President Putin on a regular basis, and this personal connection over the decades safeguards our vital interests, including attempts to prevent us from defending our northern border, and that, of course, will not happen.
Amid tensions between Damascus and Jerusalem, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to travel to the United States later this month, during the course of which he is scheduled to hold a face-to-face meeting with President Donald Trump. Both leaders are expected to discuss Syria at length, a portfolio which reportedly Jerusalem and Washington are not necessarily aligned on.
בסוף החודש אצל ארצות הברית.
At the end of the month, I will depart for the United States for another meeting with my friend, President Trump. This will be my 6th meeting with the President of the United States since he took office in January of this year, more than any other world leader. We don't have to agree on everything. And even in cases where it's necessary, I stand up for our vital interests. It's not always necessary, but when it's necessary, we stand up. The United States and Israel are two independent countries. We maintain bilateral relations that are based on shared values and also on shared interests that have only amplified. Israel has no better ally than the United States, and the United States has no better ally than Israel. I want to remind you of what U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said in recent days. President Trump only likes to help strong countries that help themselves, like Israel.
It is important to highlight that U.S. Envoy for Syria and Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barrack, has spearheaded efforts to realize Damascus's consolidation of power over all of Syria, often disregarding atrocities committed by the new jihadist regime against minorities, to include specifically the Druze, Christians, and Alawite communities. While Ambassador Barrack is heavily involved in supporting Damascus's quest for statehood, he in parallel claims that U.S. history in helping Mideast nations is abysmal, and therefore Syria needs to figure out its eventual form of governance on its own.
We need to give them the opportunity to incorporate all points of view, but at the end of the day, all points of view don't create a nation. They need to define what creates a nation. Is that centralization? Is it federalization? Is it a hybrid? What is it going to be? And from America's point of view, what we've learned is we are not good at imposing those expectations, especially in the Middle East, on others.
When asked about the complexity between Israel and Syria, Ambassador Barrack said that from his perspective, Israel is a confusing situation. He then stressed that talks between Damascus and Jerusalem are moving forward in baby steps and clearly opted out to change the topic after noting, quote, "We're going to have atrocities that continue."
We look at Syria and Israel. It's a baby steps. It's baby steps with Israel. It's a process, right? It's not an event. We're going to have speed bumps. We're going to have atrocities that continue. We're going to have dilemmas. We need to bring Lebanon and Syria together and aligned, two of the most ancient and beautiful civilizations. Iraq is having the same dilemma through paralysis in its own parliamentary process. We don't want to interfere in those political discussions.
It is interesting to point out that the foreign minister of Norway subsequently interjected in a stark breakaway from European norms and values, pointed out that the West should accept that state building includes consolidating power by force.
The Syrian government tells us that they want an inclusive government. I welcome that. I think that's wise. But it's a Syrian choice, not my choice, nor America's choice. It's something they do. And I think we Westerners, historically, which I very much like your point, is that we tend to forget how states emerge. You know, states emerge because somebody takes power, consolidates power against somebody else, and eventually you build a structure around that, and rule of law and so on comes later. And you know, it was not like there was a country called Syria. It's still the same country, but it's not like a state that was ready and you just change a few people at the top. You actually have to consolidate that power in order to be able to do anything in that place. And this is sometimes overlooked. So I think a mature recognition of how these things work in practice is very welcome. It will actually bring us further towards something that is stable and lasting in Syria.
It is important to point out that while the Doha conference in Qatar included an entire facade of pro-Damascus rhetoric, it did fail to mention that the radical Islamist and jihadist leadership under de facto President Ahmad al-Shara is actively persecuting minorities, to include Christians, Druze, and Alawites.
While the interim authorities have taken encouraging steps towards addressing past violations, these steps are only the beginning of what needs to be done. We continue to see distressing accounts of summary executions, arbitrary killings, and abductions, mainly targeting members of certain communities and individuals accused of affiliation with the former government. Hundreds were killed since the fall of the former regime. These killings were carried out by security forces of the interim authorities, groups affiliated with them, elements associated with the former government, local armed groups, and unidentified armed individuals. Other reported violations and abuses include sexual violence, arbitrary detentions, looting, destruction of homes, forced evictions, and confiscations of houses, land, and property, in addition to restrictions on freedoms of expression and of peaceful assembly. In many of these instances, the violence has mainly affected certain communities, including Alawites, Druze, Christians, and Bedouins.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. Please continue to pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide. Pray also for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. Jonathan Hassan wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, we will see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.